We got to break Cereba up. Cereba is a cartel.
We have to own our grid because we paid for it. You had it too long. That's number one. We need to control the purchasing of fuel because we pay for it. We should be in charge of buying it. The fuel companies, you better buckle up too. Jackson Point pipeline have to be reverted back to the ownership of the country. Oh, Mario, you can't tell them how to operate their business. Well, yes, we can. Having this idea that you're going to impose what's best because of what the law tell you can do will cause an uprising in this country that you've never seen before. My children are going to be saddled with the debt of a billionaire so that he can have his name printed on everything we got around here. Because, let me tell you something, this is Dart Island.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the technical difficulties earlier where out streaming and clearly I didn't have a mic on and whatnot, so, and I didn't run the intro. So, but yeah, just still working out the bugs, producing and broadcasting, independently is something to get used to. But I'll get there. Don't worry. Soon have flawless shows, and you'll swear that I got a whole team of producers inside here. Obviously today is the 1st of December, the opening of lobster season. So it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of weeks to see how that plays out. But conch season started at the beginning of November. The lobster is the following month. So yeah, down Christmas time now. So of course, people looking for their conch, their lobster, and their Cayman style beef. Luckily for us, beef is year round. We can get beef year round. But yeah, so a couple of things I want to really talk about. I know that there are some efforts that are going to be implemented in the very near future in regards to upgrading the Royal Watler terminal and the cruise terminal and and all that stuff in order to create a better experience. Excuse me, allergies are a little bad this morning, so forgive me. But yeah, I find it interesting because I know that there's still a hardcore group of people who would want to see cruise berthing facilities and would want to, build piers and whatnot. The thing is that I don't disagree that we need to separate cargo and cruise from the same port. I wholeheartedly agree with the separation and that we need to seriously have a conversation or start the conversation or finish the conversation, whichever way. Because I know that a lot of talk has been put into moving cargo out of Georgetown and whatnot, but we've gone and made some heavy investments, which is fine. CDC is the location off of Portland Road across from CUC. Across from A.L. Thompson, that back road there. That's where we do our container distribution, right? And there's nothing wrong with having that facility there because it's central Georgetown. So if we do have the opportunity to entertain or even implement putting a cargo port in the eastern districts, which is some of the places that is heavily suggested, then clearly, we would need a distribution center in the Georgetown area where most of our developments are, where most of our commerce, and that's a great distribution point. Because Cayman is condensedly populated and developed on one side of the island. If you go to Google Maps and you zoom out or zoom in and you can look at all of the infrastructure in which has been developed in the Cayman Islands over the past 50 years, you'll see that it's heavily and condensedly developed in one side of the island. So therefore, we need to start looking towards, moving cargo out of Georgetown, planning another 50 to 100 years, which is something we've never done. We always do that term after term, every 4 to 5 years, the political term planning is what I call it. But we need to seriously look at the future because clearly we're gonna have increase of population. That's a given. We need to be able to strategically shape certain structures and policies and legislation in order to accommodate moving forward. So when they did the Royal Watler Terminal, we all knew why that was done and the purpose of it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the Port Authority just brought in a new crane. They're out there assembling it now. It's an electric crane, by the way, with a diesel generator on it. Just the irony of that. There are many things I could talk about in regards to not having the proper energy source to plug the crane into. These are some of the issues, and then paying whatever we paid for it. I don't know the numbers just yet. Obviously, I'm trying to get those numbers to find out if we're getting value for money, whether or not, from what I understand, it's a crane built in Germany, shipped out of Germany. The ship that brought it here came all the way from Germany. So I can't imagine what the freight cost on that crane is. I don't know. I intend to find out. But again, we'll get into that conversation in a sec. I just want to continue with the cruise berthing facility, the enhancement of cruise tourism, the fact that we need to separate cargo and cruise, and mainly because the issues that we face is self-inflicted. We built Royal Watler. We got merchant space in there for rent. We have given leases to persons to sell merchandise in these properties. And now, why would we expect Port Authority or anybody on the port board to be geared towards equally distributing the cruise passengers so that everybody can enjoy, the benefits of having, people shop in their stores? I mean, come on, man. I mean, the writing is on the wall. It's always been on the wall, and the irony about this whole Port Authority thing is that Klein Glidden CG is the chairman of the port now today, on a port in which his government, McKeever and them, is the ones who built the Royal Watler. So I would imagine that Klein would, and Klein having a legal degree now, I would just imagine that he would be strategically and working towards trying to fix this mini-falment that we went and created in Georgetown. The thing that really bothers me about that is that we may have our rooftop and back-a-bush conversations in regards to how we feel about certain things that governments implement and point fingers, and we do all those things. But the facts are this. We got Meisner Marine to build the Royal Watler Terminal. Bad deal. The pier in itself that the cruise tenders were supposed to dock up against, built horrible. The slightest nor'wester swell. We had a minor nor'wester over the weekend. A minor nor'wester, and the seas were breaking over the top of that wharf. Again, poorly designed, poorly built. And it didn't, and we outgrew it in 2 years as opposed to building something for 50 to 100. Again, and this is not me trying to be overly critical of the facts. This is just me trying to talk about the facts in regards to what we should have versus what we should have gotten versus to what we have, and what we should have done versus to what we have done. And the reality is that we created merchant space, right, on the Royal Watler Terminal. We gave it to our preferred individuals to have contracts to sell stuff in there. And then on top of that, we guaranteed that all of the cruise passengers funneled through that port. Closing down the North and the South Terminal, which would have given the cruise passengers direct access to all of the other stores in the Georgetown Harbor, who are not, by the way, owned by government or government benefit from other than licensing fees and whatnot. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's just paint this picture, right? The government built a terminal that should have enhanced the Georgetown Harbor and create a better experience for cruise passengers. In fact, that was the low-lying fruit dangling before your face to tell you that that's what they wanted to do. But the reality is that we're going to create this upland development on this pier, on this area, and we're going to give it to our cherry-picked individuals to have contracts to work in there. Oh, and then, by the way, we're going to guarantee that we put customers there to ensure our profit margins are favorable. And that's what we've done, and that's what we continue to do. But because we've become so accustomed to it. It's like no one wants to break this perpetual chain of failure in the Georgetown Harbor. And I done a few videos on my personal Facebook page, and I shared my point of view in regards to what I believe should be happening. And the thing is that I believe a lot of times people love to kill the messenger. They hate to look at facts. In fact, that's the environment everywhere you go globally. I get it. I do know that the other day when I was in the Georgetown Harbor and we had 5 ships, I think it was Tuesday, we had 5 ships in the harbor, and you had 2 ships tendering the north and the south terminal, and you drove, and that's just 2 ships out of the 5, and you had a tremendous amount of foot traffic activity on the southern end of the Hawkeye Bay area. People were up and down, and they were in stores, and there was a lot of activity going on, and that was just a cruise ship using their tenders, and it showed, the level of activity you would have on that side of the harbor once we are distributing those cruise passengers along that corridor. And half of the reason why we had so many people backed up, standing up in the sun waiting to board the ship on the Royal Watler, because everybody had to disembark at the Royal Watler, and then they had to embark back on their tenders to go back to the ship. Everybody, now that you've had these sub-terminals that are open, you're able to distribute those persons along that entire corridor, and that's what we should be continuing to do. And I agree with the government and the Minister of Tourism of wanting to enhance the experience and then making every effort in order to do so, and ensuring that we maintain a certain level of quality that we present to visiting people to our shores. Opposed to the safe environment, the clean, and being one of the prettiest islands in the Caribbean, in the absence of that, we still need to maintain a level of quality for our experienced guests. For the guests to experience. But when I listen to some of the things that I know is circulating, I know that the minister, is touting the idea of getting new tenders and whatnot. Again, this is another area in which have been gray for so long. We got one company running the entire tender business. They'll tell you they want to come out of it because of XYZ. And I get it. But at the end of the day, why hasn't that been an industry that other people could buy a boat and put it in there as a tender service? Why is it that we have boxed out any other possibility of anyone else getting in and getting a contract to do tendering service from the ship to the port? Why? Why has that never been talked about? Why we haven't, taken that monopoly and broke it up and given it to other people? Because you have a lot of operators that would have been more than happy to buy a boat to tender passengers that has a guarantee return. Because, as far as I remember, and I stand corrected, but I'm pretty sure I'm certain of, and I'm right about this. Far as I remember, it was $5 per person for tendering. Far as I remember, I stand corrected. But let's put that in perspective, right? If you got 2 ships and you're or 3 ships, 4 ships, 5 ships, whatever, you tendering 25, 30,000 people on a daily basis, you're looking at $5 a head. I don't know if that $5 was one way or was it $5 each way. I don't know. I'll look into that. But whichever, you are guaranteed that $5. So why is it that one company was allowed to enjoy and reap the benefits of that one section of business when it came to cruise? Why? Tell me why. Because I can tell you that it's an immensely lucrative business for one individual or one company to have. It should have been equally distributed amongst the Caymanian people who had the ability and the wherewithal to put a tender boat or couple in service. And certainly, if we're going to talk about enhancing, experience for cruise passengers, we also need to look at the distribution of opportunities along that entire stretch of corridor in which we call the Georgetown Harbor. And we have experienced seamen that can do it, and people who are coming up, and these are industries that we should be controlling on our own, and being participants on the highest level. Hence the reason why you hear me talk about real estate and all these other things that should be carved out and allocated for Caymanians only. And I don't make any apologies about that. I'm not stuttering when I think, and I'm not sitting here saying, oh, well, maybe we can do that or maybe we can't. No, we need to absolutely, definitively say and pass laws that create industries for Caymanian participation only. I mean, why is that? Why is that something that we can't even have a conversation about? Why is it something that we haven't really actually looked at seriously as a government or as a people and said we need to implement these things moving forward? So therefore, there's no excuse for the lazy Caymanian who's sitting down saying I can't find work. Well, we got industry dedicated just for you. Even if you don't like it, go train, get yourself up to speed, and come get a work until you find something better. But at least having a job better than not having one complaining all the time. And this is the problem that we have. And you see, a lot of the misconception in the hospitality industry with Caymanians being lazy and not wanting to work. The problem is that the Caymanians are not in a position to pool their resources to live below the poverty line and let it work. You know, because they have to inject all of their money in this economy. All the money that they make here, they have to spend here. And Cayman is an extremely expensive jurisdiction. They don't have the luxury of living in a one-bedroom apartment with 12 people paying $20 a month or $50 or $75 a month, and then taking the lion's share of their money and sending it back to an economy that the dollar have far more reach than it does in this economy. So it works for cheap labor. It don't work for common local labor. It just don't. And until we identify those issues that we face in the labor force, we're not going to be able to properly implement any legislation or policy to tackle these things. And I've seen it over and over and over again, where Caymanians are given opportunities to work in the hospitality industry in certain areas, the bars, the restaurants, whatever, tour operators, and then they're expected to make do on a wage that just not livable. Now, do we have lazy Caymanians who pretend to want to work, show up one day and no show up the next? We got those too. But we're painting every Caymanian with the same stroke of the brush, and I'm not crying wolf or bawling that it's not fair. I'm just simply saying that is not the case. That is in fact not what's taking place. And Caymanians are not lazy. Caymanians do have a group of people who are unbelievably unemployable. I know that for a fact. I know a few of them. But unless we, when I say we, let me just be very careful in my wording. But as a government that is in charge of the well-being of the people, you would imagine that they would sit down and strategically talk about planning legislation and policies to ensure participation on the highest level. Because if a Caymanian got to go to a place of employment that is predominantly ran by work permit holders and foreigners, where do you think he gonna land in that pecking order in the queue? He not gonna land in an area in which he'll be able to progress in that environment, simply because the persons who run that environment is definitely looking out for their own over them. And those are the realities, and whether they want to believe that or not, those are facts. So if we have an industry that says Caymanians only, then we don't have that fear and the worryation of having someone from a different jurisdiction running an industry that I gonna just perpetually be working my butt off in order to try to get to level A, and no matter how much work I put in, I'm just not able to get to where I want to be. So yeah, I get discouraged and I quit, and then I go into the box of, oh, Caymanians don't want to work. But the sad part about what we face here in Cayman is that solutions are there, ideas are there to be explored, but we're not exploring any of these ideas simply because we face the issue of cowards who don't want to make the necessary change, who don't want to, carve out that area and that spot for the Cayman Islands, and that's where we have a challenge. So, I argue the fact all the while, and I'm gonna just tell this person that I'm broadcasting live, and I know that for a fact that if we were to sit down around a table and strategically plan policies to make sure that Caymanians can participate if they want in certain areas, you'll find far more interested people. But when they got to go out and compete in an industry that is not controlled or not something that they know they can progress, they're not going to do it. They're not going to have much motivation to do it. So believe me when I tell you, let me just send this out and then I'm done. But at the end of the day, what I want to see is politicians who are willing to at least have the conversation publicly and stop hiding behind it's complicated or it's going to run away business or you just can't do it like that. Listen, let me explain something to you all. Back in the 1960s, Cayman was just fresh blossoming flower that everybody who lived in other jurisdictions, who understood certain industries, knew the future. They came in here and they got involved and they took advantage of a situation. And when I say take advantage, they capitalized on a situation in which we had available and we just weren't aware of. And now we have this melting pot of issues that we face simply because people are coward to make a change. They're afraid of change, and I don't understand it. So when I hear the Minister for Labour, Mr. Miles, say that we're not in the business of carving out any industries for Caymanians only, that really bothers me, because all of the things that you have said prior to making that statement would have made me believe that, boy, you actually working for the Cayman brand. And I'm not saying that his heart or his head not in the right place. He just not willing to do the right thing in every area. He not willing to go all the way. He willing to tiptoe around certain things. Real estate industry should be for Caymanians only. Facts. Tourism and hospitality and all of these things that we need cheap labor. Yes, but all of these industries need to have sections of it carved out for the Caymanian participation only. I'm sorry, but I don't think that being a bar back in a restaurant or a bar in the Cayman Islands in the hospitality industry is going to cut the cheese. And then of course now, my biggest pet peeve is that we have accepted the cost of having a job as payment enough for people railroading and just taking away everything that the Cayman Islands have to offer and calling it their own, and then they let you in with a job and say, oh, well, we employ Caymanians. I look at the whole Camana Bay advertisements that they have up now, and let me just be clear on one thing, and I want to be clear on one thing, So the people at DART that is paid to fluff it up and boost it up, I don't have nothing against them. That's their job. But find me one jurisdiction, just one, that family, the Dart family, went into that it ended well. They're doing exactly what they did in other jurisdictions, other than the fact that we are smile and wave, complacent. Oh, come on in. Let me make you a cup of tea and fix you a sandwich, right? Other than that, they are doing exactly what they did in Argentina, in Greece, and all the other countries in which they went in to infiltrate, buy out their debt, and try to hold the country hostage. They're doing the exact same thing here. Listen to me good. They own liquor that get you drunk and impaired. They own radio media. They own TV media, and they own print media. Are you all paying attention? Oh, and by the way, the most important part, they're the largest real estate owners in Cayman. They're the largest property owners in Cayman. So, tell me, when you add all of that up, based on what you have seen, and believe me when I tell you, right? You're not going to stand a chance in hell when they want to pull the reins in and start tightening up. They got a big ad out now talking about Cayman is, they want to be good for Cayman today and tomorrow, and they got these hospitality. You understand that they open up a complete entire hospitality training program. Listen to me, Cayman Islands. Listen to me really good. The fact that they are talking about hospitality and the areas in their organization in which they want Caymanians to work in, go and look at the jobs. It's in this lower, and don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking any job at all, you know. I'm just simply saying is that why they're not talking about the other jobs that pay the executive level money that's in the institutions and in the areas in which they're not talking about none of those. They're not training nobody to take those jobs. No. You got tiers of this thing. And the job in which they're referring to is jobs where they can control you and constantly have financial control over you. No. Don't get me wrong, you know. I don't know fool. And I see things for what they are. And to each his own. So we need to make sure that we put proper policies in place and make sure that we implement these and enforce these things. Yes, they can be developers here, yes, but we need to listen. If anything happening in the Cayman Islands, we need to be benefiting as a people, as a country, and as you know, and we need to make sure that these things are constant, that we constantly benefiting from the things that are benefiting for themselves. Because you know we are not on high up on the pecking order. We're not. So the tender business should have been allocated to anybody who can afford a tender and participate. That's my opinion, and I think that's what should be. And I hope the minister think about that. But I believe, as far as I know, you know, family connections and these other things. And I'm not saying anything. I'm just simply saying that I wouldn't be shocked if the minister don't even talk about that, because the persons who own the tender business is relatives. And I get it. To each his own. Everybody got to look out for their own, right? I guess. I guess you can look at it that way. But I just think that there are a lot of things in Cayman that can create financial wealth, and the distribution of wealth in Cayman is non-existent. The Caymanian people, and now that we're smarter than we've ever been, education-wise, because I can tell you, our forefathers. Let me tell you something. Those were real men and women. They fought through the toughest times and created something that we now enjoy, and now we're letting it slip away. If in some cases are already gone, but you know, how do we mandate these things? How do we get control of these things? But what I want to say is that the fuel industry, the energy industry, all these things, like I said, they just bought an electric crane for the port, you know, an electric crane. But again, hopefully, and I guess they're keeping the old one as backup. At least that makes sense. Make sure we don't catch ourselves where, you know, we can't offload and load containers. You know, we import everything in these islands, so we need to make sure that that's working flawlessly. We need to make sure that we open back up all of Georgetown for all the cruise people to come in and enjoy all of the things that we offer, not just the Royal Watler, the mini Falmouth. And if, for those of you who don't know what Falmouth is a port down in Jamaica that gated out all the people on the outside to make any money from the tourism. Facts. So, but yeah, we need to have some serious conversations moving forward, and I really hope that we can get some traction in the area of getting good ideas implemented and seeing them through. So I agree with the ministry, with the minister or the ministers in charge of the ports and tourism, so to upgrade and enhance and create a better experience. We need it. We need to take those buses off of the cargo port, put them over by the old tower building site, and ensure that we don't have any confusion. We need to stop letting everybody come through the Royal Watler. Yes, Royal Watler is a pier and it's a port. Let them come through there, yes, but don't what happens? I got a question, right? The people who come in on the south, when the boats are, when the cruise passengers are brought in through the south and the north terminal, they can't go on the Royal Water, you know. They cannot go on the Royal Water Pier because they got it gated. So those who came in there, the only ones can go in and out of there. So, but anyway, ladies and gentlemen, today is Monday, so we were just doing a quick show, quick broadcast. I made a promise that we'll be in the studio at least 3 days a week, and we need to continue talking about the pressing issues. You know, I'm not a news. This is not a news platform. This is a platform that speak on issues in which affect us fundamentally, and we need to make sure that we have open dialogue at all times. And hopefully by the end of the week, I know I have the call thing set up now. If you want to join the conversation, you can just click join stream and then you come on and we can have a conversation. But I'm trying to get it set up where you can actually call into the show and then we can conversate and then another person can call in after. So that's what we're working on right now. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your Monday and keep your eyes and ears open, I'm telling you, because there's a lot of things that we need to focus on moving forward and ensuring that in most cases we need to get behind the government and some of the things that they want to implement. We can't just be hecklers for being heckling sake. We just got to be able to identify what's good from what's bad and things. And yeah, we have every right to question everything. So, but yeah, enjoy the rest of your Monday. And for all of you who made it to work, hats off and kudos to you. And for all of you that called in sick because it's Monday, you need to tighten up your belt. That's all I can say. But yeah, on Wednesday we'll have another show. I want to try and get one or two different guests in the studio to start having open dialogue on certain topics. And some of the people, I got to reach out to Mr. Glidden, who is the chairman of the port, and ask him some more details about the Crane so I can share it on this platform. The capabilities and the things that the Crane can do, and what benefits and how that the reliability, and I think that's important that we get the correct information before we start insinuating certain things. Yeah.